Welcome to our Research 8111 group poster presentation, Common Core in Child Management, a Qualitative Journey. This poster presentation was submitted in partial fulfillment for Research 8111 Qualitative Research Methods, June 23rd, 2014. Background information about the researchers. All four are pursuing PhDs in the field of education at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Over the course of 5 weeks, as partial fulfillment for Research 8111 Qualitative Research Methods, our research group conducted 3 research mini projects. This presentation was completed as a culminating assignment for the course. Our first assignment during the course was an interview mini project. Our group chose to do our research on Common Core standards and teachers' knowledge of those standards. We each individually interviewed teachers in their respective field of education to gain their perspective and understanding of Common Core education.
So our first question dealt with Common Core and how teachers perceived Common Core. And I found that to be quite interesting, particularly when a lot of statements were being made that, um, in one interview, that they felt like Common Core needed to be tailored specifically to the audience. But Common Core really pushes, what we found was Common Core really is intended to push college readiness. And even though it says career readiness, schools are emphasizing the college readiness portion and the literacy and writing and all of that. And what we found was that English teachers, especially, seem to be more grounded in Common Core and seem to have a better understanding of how to use it, how to make it work, what's its purpose, and found it to be beneficial. Whereas those who didn't really teach English were kind of struggling with how do I incorporate these skills that are required to make people 21st century learners into my coursework. And the whole notion of tailoring Common Core to a specific audience, especially in situations where schools, majority of the students are not wanting to go to college. How do you make it so that they get the skills that they need in order to be more literate, in order to write well, skills that, in one interview, the person literally said they're going to need regardless of if they get a job or if they actually go to college. What was encouraging was that they felt like, at least the English teachers, that kids were learning to write better, kids were learning to be more expressive in their writing, um, which was being beneficial, especially for those who really intended to go to college. They weren't coming back saying that they had struggled as much as they would have before Common Core. But essentially, it is a transition. And that's the big thing about it. It's a transition where training, in some cases, is not adequate enough. And in other cases, it's adequate in terms of the college readiness aspect, but not in terms of the career readiness. So there is some work that needs to be done with Common Core, but I think it's going to be here for a while, well, I shouldn't say a while. I think it's going to be here until somebody can figure out how to get out of the policy itself. But for teachers, English teachers, math teachers are finding that it's useful, but it's specifically written for them. Whereas those who don't teach those subjects and are being forced to adapt it on their own are struggling. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes and moves forward.
On May 29th, I had the privilege of interviewing a second grade teacher at Irwin Academy, which is a CMS magnet school for gifted students. I was able to speak to a second grade teacher who's in her third year of instruction and implementation. She's been part of the Common Core implementation from the beginning. She had definitely some positive things to say about the Common Core standards. She felt like they were good standards that could help her students to be able to be college ready and to achieve when that time came for those students. She did talk about some concerns that she had in terms of the professional development that was provided. She did have professional development going into the fall, but had to spend a good bit of her own individual time. Digging down was the term that she used to unpack and understand the actual components and guidelines that were set forth in the Common Core goals and standards, and she wanted to make sure that she was meeting the expectations of her building level administrators. She said that she did at times feel like she lacked clarity for what they wanted for her to do in the classroom. Her understanding of Common Core and their understanding of some of the standards sometimes didn't match, and she felt like she just wanted that clarity. I asked her if she had an opportunity to kind of set aside the Common Core, if she would, and she said no, she thought there were benefits. She did express the need for wanting more support and wanting more professional development. She wanted to be able to differentiate more in her classroom to meet the needs of those students that were ready to work at a higher grade level and not just stay at that second grade instructional level if her students need that differentiation. And she wanted that clarity of expectation. She talked about the assessment piece and how time consuming it was and how it took away from her instructional practice in the classroom, and would love to see that have a leveling off as well, so that she could make sure that she was spending the time that she needed actually teaching and meeting the needs of her students.
On Thursday, May 29th, I conducted my Common Core interview with Daryl Potts, a social studies teacher at West Mecklenburg High School. My personal connection with Mr. Potts is we previously taken courses together at UNC Charlotte during our master's program. So he was a great candidate for me to interview for this assignment. Mr. Potts provided detailed information throughout the interview process about his understanding of Common Core. He discussed the training he received. He stated that there were only 2 Common Core trainings over the course of the school year, and that the administration had basically told the teachers to research Common Core and to get together with their PLCs to implement the best practices for their subject area. Over the course of our 25-minute interview, Mr. Potts provided information about practices that he used in his classroom as far as writing journals, more research-based questioning, common assessments no longer were multiple choice, but now they could be hypothetical questioning, more written-based work as a result of Common Core. He also stressed the accountability aspect of Common Core. He stated that at his particular school, the Common Core was not actually enforced. Teachers were not held accountable for implementing Common Core outside of literacy, which is English and math classrooms. He stated that his students did not suffer due to the lack of the enforcement of Common Core, but he felt that they may have made greater gains if the implementation would have been followed throughout the year. He also stated that his PLC had worked together to create lesson plans related to Common Core, as well as just getting his students to think higher, using more vigorous terms in relation to Common Core. And he felt that his students would be a little bit more prepared for college after the implementation of Common Core has been successfully used for multiple years. His concerns with Common Core was that due to recent legislation initiatives, that the Common Core standards would not be used long enough to fully understand their success rate as well as their failures.
In our effort to answer our research question, how do Common Core standards impact teachers and students, I interviewed a high school English teacher from a STEM high school in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. I selected this teacher because he's a 21-year teaching veteran and is someone who really looks out for what's best for students and education rather than what's easiest for teachers. During our interview, the themes emerged that the biggest impact of Common Core for teachers and students is the paradigm shift of what teaching and learning actually looks and sounds like. The previous ideas of lecturing or students silently completing worksheets or multiple choice tests or reading individual text in isolation is contrary to the new ideas of Common Core. The idea of teacher as facilitator of student-centered lessons, which requires students to collaborate, to synthesize multiple sources of information, to be able to discern and discriminate information, to solve problems, and to engage with more real-world text and reflect on their thinking and analytical process seem to be much more apparent in Common Core. This paradigm shift also required teaching and learning leads to the second theme that our group noted, which was an increase on professionalism. Because of this main change in what teaching and learning looks like, teachers now have to realize that they have to take a lot of the responsibility of professional development on themselves. My teacher discussed that he felt like there had been ample opportunities provided by his school system and by his school, but also realized that much of the responsibility lied personally on himself and on the other members of his professional learning community, therefore increasing his professionalism.
The second part of our poster presentation discusses our participant observation and documentary analysis mini projects. We combined them because the research question was the same. How do parents manage children's behavior in public settings? On Saturday, June 7th, I conducted my 45-minute field note mini project at a T-ball game in Mount Holly, North Carolina. The purpose of this research project was to examine the relationship between parents and children in public settings. I chose this location because my 3 sons had a T-ball game at the park that morning. In addition to my sons playing T-ball, I also volunteered as a team mom for their team. So this location made a perfect setting for this assignment. Over the course of my 45 minutes, I took notes on several families that were actually playing T-ball with my children that particular day. I watched a coach and his wife and their interaction with their 2 children, a 5-year-old boy that was on the team and a 2-year-old girl that was there because that was just how the situation was set up, where her mom was also a teen mom and she had to watch her daughter. So I just watched their interactions. The dad and the son actually got into a verbal altercation on the playing field, in which the son and dad both displayed their anger, and the mom also showed support for her son throughout the game. She cheered when he played, but during the time that he came in the dugout, she showed her frustration and his attitude as well. She did not really comment on his actions, but her visual state. She kind of rolled her eyes and stated that her son's attitude was similar to his father's. While she was dealing with her son's issues, she also had issues with her 3-year-old daughter, who was walking in and out of the dugout and not listening to her mom. So she had to call her name and remind her to stay in the dugout several times throughout the process. One of the other girls on the team that I watched was a young girl who had a blended family. So I watched her interaction with her mother and her grandmother, as well as her father and maybe it was his wife or girlfriend, as well as her brother. So that was an interesting family dynamic and how they behaved. They examined and managed their child's behavior in a public setting. The mother and grandmother were very supportive. They called the girl's name throughout the time and cheered for her for doing a good job. And they also came to the fence to give high fives when she was sitting in a dugout. The child's interaction with the father throughout the game was pretty limited. He sat there, he watched the game. He also played with his other child. He never really moved. Another girl that I watched her family interaction throughout the process was a little blonde-haired girl. Her father was a constant supporter. He brought her younger sister to the gate and just said good job, big sister, and good job to the girl by stating her name and that he was proud of her. Her mother had very little interaction with her during the game. She kind of sat back on a blanket that was kind of close to the playground that was at the park. Another interaction between another family that I was watching was between a young African American boy and his mother. His mother stood up at the gate, kind of close to the dugout throughout the game. She assisted her son with opening a drink. He bypassed the team moms to get to his mom to purposely open his drink. So I think it's a codependent relationship there that each one of them depends on each other, and that was very evident because he bypassed other adults to purposely go and interact with his mother, and she was very forthcoming and accommodating to help him with his drink and reminded him to put his hat on and to play, and she cheered him on as well. So positive reinforcement for um, his skills on the t-ball field. Um, and that was the conclusion of my interview. But as my group met to discuss our field notes for this process, we actually used a visual map to map out common themes amongst our field notes that we had saw. This process was pretty intense, and you will also see a visual that I will place up right after this video to see how our group came up with similarities and differences across parenting styles for their children to manage their behavior in public settings.
For the observation and document analysis project, our group decided on a new research question. How do parents manage children's behavior in public settings? I conducted my observation at a 4-year-old birthday party at a park. This observation and our concept mapping analytic approach helped me to see 3 main parenting strategies. Number one, what I saw very often was the idea of positive reinforcement being used by parents when their children had done something good or to encourage them to do something good. The next thing that I noticed was that parents would sometimes ignore inappropriate behaviors rather than trying to correct them. And the third thing, and the thing that I thought was very important, was the idea that parents would engage with their children either in a physical activity or in a meaningful conversation. Therefore, there was really no opportunity for inappropriate behaviors to occur. When we moved to the document analysis project, we relied on the same question, and I selected a brochure from a parenting class, as well as an article of a series of resources produced by the National Agency for Head Start. And this article was about the importance of the parent-child relationship. While these documents did not offer the same quantity of information or details that my observation did, we were still able to create a concept map that looked very similar to the one that we created earlier. The main ideas that came through in this were the importance of establishing rules, the importance of implementing consequences, the importance of establishing healthy family relationships and bonds, and ultimately the one that seemed to sort of underlie all the other ideas was the idea of understanding the appropriate level of development where your child is. All of these things were the important concepts to how parents seem to manage their children's behavior in public.
For our group observation project, we investigated the research question, how do parents manage child behaviors in public settings? I conducted my 45-minute observation at a Walmart in Indian Trail, North Carolina, and got an opportunity to see many different parent and child interactions during that 45-minute time period. One of the things that I saw was a lot of parents who were very engaged with their children, talking to them, having dinner with them, asking about their day. I saw one parent walk in, and his children had run ahead of him, and he reached out his hand to his 3 or 4-year-old son and grab his hand in a protective way and walk into the Walmart. But I also saw a special needs child come in with Down syndrome, about 9 years old, and his mother had to be assertive with him, to correct him. She was kind but firm and clear with her expectations or how she needed him to respond, as he was not listening as they entered the store. I will say overall that the parents were very distracted and tired. It was late in the evening and clearly had a long day. Sometimes parents ignored children's behaviors, and it was appropriate based on that child's age. Sometimes it was inappropriate, and a parent would have needed to have stepped forward. But it was clear to see that there were children who were helping their parents, and that was not communicated in the line, but a clear expectation that had been set previously. An overall theme that was also observed was just a lack of consequences for students or for children. And I think it was potentially because it was in a public setting. And it was just intriguing to see how different people reacted with one another. I had elected to complete my interview at the Indian Trail Walmart as to not run into anybody that I knew, and actually saw 3 different people that I knew. So it was interesting to try to balance the observation piece with actually being interrupted with the process.
Okay, our last research question dealt with the notion of parents and how they control or manage child behavior in public. And that was an interesting 2-part kind of series where we did participant observations and then we looked at document analysis. And the documents kind of linked to some of the things that, well, gave tips to some of the things that we were seeing in public in terms of, and particularly in my observation, I noticed one little girl was just all over the place and constantly having to get up and constantly being told to sit down, and her mother did little distraction activities and games with her and the other children that were at the table to try to keep them under control. And that fed into the documents where we were seeing a notice of building relationships and being particular about how you discipline your child in public in a way that does not humiliate the child or you as a parent, but also not getting into a power struggle. And so I felt like in that instance the mother did the right thing, and she could have followed up with her, once they left the restaurant or something like that. So those two-part things were allowed us to kind of triangulate and see if what we were seeing in public or in the observation setting and in the field really was validated by the documents that we were also reviewing as well. So, enjoyed it. Time to move on.
Thank you for viewing our presentation. Are there any questions?